If you're homeschooling your teens or you're about to homeschool teens, this Homeschool Mom Chat is especially for you. If we haven't met, my name is Teresa Wiedrick. I'm a certified life coach and homeschool mentor and graduated homeschool mom of 4 kiddos. Hi, Lori. And I want to dedicate a special time, especially to homeschool parents of teens. So this week's episode on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast episode, I'm speaking about The Awakened Family by the author, Dr. Shefali. It's about conscious parenting, if you're familiar with this concept at all. And all the fundamentals to this book, I have found myself before I even met Dr. Shefali. Like, for instance, you and I both know homeschooling or parenting in general. It brings out in us all the things that we need to figure out, all the things that we need to grow in and learn from. It helps us to identify our triggers. Can I hear an amen? That's been my experience. And now that I coach other homeschool moms, I know I'm not alone. I wasn't alone. I thought I was alone, but I'm not alone, because this is a common refrain of all parents. Differently, we experience it differently, but we all recognize that there are various triggers or things that we haven't healed or rendered over the course of our lives, and it comes out in our parenting experience, and even more so with our teens. So today I wanted to share with you a little bit of the insights that I've had from Dr. Shefali's book in the context of teens. So I do a flyover of this book and the conversation points on the podcast, which was released today. But now that, I've had I have 1 teenager and I've got 3 older kiddos. But now that I've done this journey long enough, walking alongside other moms with their teenagers and also my own, there are certain commonalities that I see, no matter what kind of teen you have in your home. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about the things that I learned from Dr. Shefali's book in the context of homeschooling and parenting teens. And if you've got questions or you've got thoughts along the conversation here, I'd love to hear it. Just throw it in the comment section. Hopefully I'll be able to see it as you're sharing. And so for those of you that don't have teens yet, I'm going to actually define what I believe a teenager is. And I don't actually think it starts with 13. Yes, officially, I get it starts with a 13 instead of 12. We don't call it 12 teen. But sometimes some of our children feel like they begin becoming teens when they're 8. And some of them 15. They're all different. But when I speak about teenagers, I'm really speaking about that age where they begin to get a separate sense of themselves. They individuate. Check that word out, that individuating word. I think it's a word that just so encapsulates the energy of what it is to be a teenager. It is, I want to be close and connected to the people that matter to me, but I also want to be me. I want to be separate. I want to be my own special self. I want to know who I am. And, if you ever think about why it is that our kids counter us, because I sure did, especially in the beginning years, I was confounded by it. Why would you counter me? What's the point of this? Don't you know that I love you? Or all the things that I told myself that didn't allow me to accept that actually the reason they're doing this is because you're their parent. Who are they going to individuate from? They are figuring out who they are in the world, and they are figuring out who they are differently than us, which, if you're anything like me in my early parenting years, I found that really challenging because I didn't put it into a nice frame that helped me understand that they're not doing something to me. And in fact, it has nothing to do with me. It is them trying to figure out who they are. So I have a kiddo that just turned 16, and his story is different than every one of my other kiddo stories. And I'm not going to go into specifics about each of my kids because, as you know, especially when they're teens, they're not really eager and keen for us to share all their deep stories. But if you've wondered if I've related to you in a story in your family that has been especially challenging, The answer is yes. I have probably got common stories in my own experience. We all have different stories with different kids, but some of them were really challenging, certain stories, and some of them were kind of okay and normal-ish, or the things that I would have graded as acceptable. And then there's the other ones that really stretched me to come outside my parenting box, the thing that I thought it was supposed to be. So what I've come to understand, especially through books like The Awakened Family, is that parenting teens is not about academics. It's not about trying to get them to the next step of their educational journey, like college or career or something. Yes, our culture frames it that way. Yes, we could be doing that, but it's not the most important thing, in my opinion. I think our goal is to help our kids become more purposeful in their sense of, in their story, in their life story, to get clear on what their next steps are for who they are on this planet at this time, and also how they can build connections with the most important people in their world. So we're not talking about school subjects in homeschool, high school, or in this conversation. I don't see that as the most important element, because when you have a kiddo who is engrossed in their interests and they're engaged in their world, it doesn't stop when they're 13. It doesn't stop when they're 15. When they became teens, they just are extending into the next part of their lives. They're just doing what they always did as a homeschooled kiddo to, say, a junior high aged kiddo to a high school aged kiddo. There's not a big transition when it comes to, there doesn't have to be a big transition from the activities that they're pursuing earlier on to the older activities. It could be, you could frame it differently based on your educational intention. There could be an anteing up of the activities that your child chooses for her next steps, like college-related classes, or you fill in the blank. But the thing is, if your kiddo at 8 is already being empowered to live intentionally, they're going to live intentionally when they're 12 and 15 and 18. And dare I add, also 60 and 80, and for as many years as they've been given. So they just naturally transition their academic focus or their interests or their learning focuses as they continue on. So I see that our personal growth journeys, our purpose-based journeys, or our desire for purpose as adults and parents, is being mirrored, or not directly, but is also a mirrored example for our kids. Or let me say that differently. Just as we spend our lives trying to figure out who we are and what we're about, they're in that phase. So I find it really interesting that not everybody, but a lot of women who are perimenopausal or menopausal are also going through these big shifts. We are experiencing what they call as an adolescence in our brain. Fun, huh? Another adolescence? Well, it turns out our kids are experiencing similar things. And the adolescence is tangible physiological changes of our brain. Stuff is actually changing in there. It's not just our hair getting thinner and we're having a harder time sleeping and, all the other things that come with perimenopause. But we're actually getting a clear sense of what we want to be doing for the next few decades that we have on the planet, if we're given that many years. And differently, but similarly, our kids at their teenage years are also getting this experience of living lives, or living their life more intentionally, because they're becoming more aware of who they are. And they're becoming more aware of who they are in context or in contrast to their parents or the people that matter most to them. So that's their journey of becoming more purposeful at an adolescent stage. And we too, at our stage, our perimenopausal, menopausal stage, also are transitioning into a different journey, but one of purpose, focusing on purpose. So having said all that, I think, what's the point then of high school? What's the point of homeschool high school? What's the point of supporting our kids on the journey? Is it about just academics? And I wholeheartedly think it absolutely isn't. In fact, it doesn't have to be so hard. it will be hard if we're trying to push our kids through programs or through an educational approach that isn't designed for them or doesn't feel natural to them or doesn't feel like an extension of who they really are. It will be hard to push your child through some program or approach that they weren't designed for, that they weren't meant for, that they don't want, but that you might want. That might be hard. That'll cause things to be a lot more tricky. Also, I see that from my experience, or in the early days, I had no sense of this, and I still find myself falling into this at times of wanting to correct behaviors or fixing behaviors or correcting attitudes instead of looking at my own reactions or my own triggers or my own internal world and saying, why am I being triggered by that? That's my goal. Don't always hit it. Can I hear an amen from the child that's watching me live right now? Give me a heart there. Okay, so I know it to be true. I know there won't come a time when I figured this entirely out. But I do know that my goal is to work towards listening and to also assessing and looking at my own triggers, my own reactions, and say, what is it that is triggering me right now? What's my emotional reaction when I see my child doing certain things or saying certain things or thinking certain things? What is that particular behavior trigger in me? What is it compelling me to look at? What have I been not addressed? What are the things that are unhealed in me? Yeah, why am I being triggered is a great question. It's, I would say that question is kind of the source of all my self-compassion coaching. But that question is sometimes it takes you years to unpack, or you really don't have clarity as to why something is bothering you so much. And I think there's value in recording our experiences in a journal or talking with somebody, but actually recording it and saying, okay, what's the context? What's going on around this situation? What's compelling me to feel whatever it is, you fill in the blank, anger or shame or guilt or whatever it is. And if we repeatedly look at that storyline, if we repeatedly look at the context, it will give us over the course of time more context to understand why we're engaging, why we're feeling the way we're feeling, why we're showing up as we're showing up. There was a homeschool mom that I had a conversation with. I'm going to call her Sophia. That's not her name. Sophia shared that she struggled with her kids when they disappointed her. And so she knew that she was supposed to be an unconditionally loving mom, but she also knew that she wasn't really doing that. And I had a conversation with her. You can hear the details of that conversation on the podcast episode today. But we talked about how sometimes our kids trigger old disappointments and insecurities that we've carried for a very long time. And even though I don't like it any more than anybody else does. I just don't. I don't enjoy the feeling. I don't like having the interruption in my regularly scheduled day, but I know that it is part of relating to people, especially relationships with our kids and relationships with our partners. Those two have such a big impact on our souls, probably our parents or various other people that are deeply connected to us as well. But it's also an opportunity for us. And I don't say that lightly because I know that it's an opportunity that doesn't feel like an opportunity, but it is us being called to realize that parenting and homeschooling don't just show us who our kids are, but also who we are and what we need to work on or grow into next, and what we might still need to learn. So there's another theme from the awakened awakened family, which I rephrased I titled the podcast episode The Awakened Homeschool Family, obviously because these are the women that I'm typically working with. But there's another theme from this book that I discussed about unrealistic expectations. I feel like I'm the queen of unrealistic expectations, or I should say I was. I am not anymore, but I was. And I could tell you all the categories of how I thought I was unrealistic, but I would like to tell you that I can tell you in one sentence, the name of my blog way back when, I called it Capturing the Charmed Life. That is all. I expected the charmed life. And anyways, lots of stuff happens in your everyday, like conflict as you're heading out the door, trying to get kids to soccer practice, or you fill in the blank, whatever's happened to you today that you're like, yeah, also this and this and this. There's so many possible things that change our days up and interrupt us in ways that we feel emotionally hijacked sometimes, but we certainly feel like our day is hijacked. And I've been there. Letting go of those unrealistic expectations of things all aligning, or whatever it is that you find you're especially challenged by as an unrealistic expectation. A lot of people, I hear this on repeat, they say, well, you want to know how to let go of unrealistic expectations? Lower them. No, lower them some more. Okay, lower them more. And it's hilarious. It's funny. But that's not a practical way to really address our unrealistic expectations. I think we can put more meat on this discussion by saying, have you considered tracking one area where you've been triggered, one storyline that you see on repeat as a frustration for you, writing it down, learning more about the context of this unrealistic expectation. You could create like an unrealistic expectation notebook where you're just writing your trigger moments in the day and saying, was I expecting something at this time? Was there something about this scenario that you have told yourself this should not have happened? And what is it? Ask yourself and answer specifically, what is the thing that you might want to let go of, that expectation that you might want to let go of? Or ask yourself, is that expectation fair? Because sometimes it is. I'm not saying that every time we expect something, it's not realistic. That's also not fair. You know, when your kids are little and for the very first time you discover that somebody's hitting somebody or they're doing something really unkind. And you're like, this should not, could not, will not happen. Or maybe those words just came from my mouth. But this can't happen. We cannot do this. And yet it is, and it did. So therefore it's happening. But our expectations is that children, or mine was, that kids shouldn't be fighting. I don't want them to fight. We're going to all just live our charmed lives. Turns out not realistic. So you can ask yourself, is this an unrealistic expectation? Is it fair? Well, yes, I would like my children to never have arguments. I'm sure they would like me to never have an argument with my husband too. And also, is it realistic? Kids are going to grow up. They are going to need to process how to be in relationships. And how are they going to do that except have conflicts at times or figure out how to share the green cup? That one might be from real life. Also my childhood, not my kids. So, or you could ask about your unrealistic expectation. Is the expectation beneficial, or is it rooted in something that I need to let go of? You could write those questions at the top of your unrealistic expectation journal and then watch it for a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So one of the beginning shifts in how my homeschool approach, besides the academic approach shift that I had about year 3 or year 4, was one that has had many iterations. When I first started to share it, I was so uncomfortable that I was sharing this very vulnerable truth. And it was, here it is, that though I wouldn't have said this, and I certainly don't think I was thinking these exact words, I think I was trying to control how people were showing up with each other, how they were doing their work, how they were using their time, what they decide, or how they decided to clean or not clean their rooms, or any other area where you identify with your friends or yourself, where you might be trying to control. Because I remember thinking, no, I'm just trying to do this for the good of my child. I'm trying to teach them how to show up in the world or to do things. And I think that's true. And also it kind of borders on control at times. And if I've learned anything from homeschooling teens or just being in a teen's world long enough, it is that control, our sense of parental control, is just a mirage. It is a mirage. Even if you think you can create a construct in any area of a child or teen's life, you can't. You think you can. But when they grow up and they tell you that that's not how they experience things, they didn't come to the light and finally understand that their parent was right about cleaning that room, or they didn't decide to think about some big world history or world event the same way that you did because you declared that this is the way it is, this is the way we see things. They don't see things our way just because we tell them to. Even the compliant kids, the ones that trend toward being compliant, just because they sit down and be quiet and don't stir up trouble as they are mentally disagreeing with their parent, doesn't mean that they're always agreeing with everything the parent says or the way that we approach things. And so I think this control thing is a mirage. I know that it is a mirage. And actually, here is one of the biggest ways I can share with you what I've learned about how we can know for sure that our sense of controlling the environment or controlling choices or controlling anything is a mirage. No matter what your personality is or what your story was as a child, you probably had an experience or a moment where an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad, somebody said to you, this is what we're going to believe, or this is what we believe, or this is how we do things, or this is anything. Your instinct was either to fight it or be quiet, not say anything, or to mull through it over the course of time. But if someone were to tell you this is the way it is, you were mentally constructing ways it probably wasn't. And perhaps as a grown adult, you now recognize that perhaps they had good hearts in why they shared what they did, but you still don't agree. Or you see things a little differently. We all are unique selves, even the children that are in our homes that we're raising, that even though they're in our homes for a reason, and they were given to us to mother for a reason, and we are growing and learning from them as well, but they are in our stories, but they are separate individuals. And you know that quote from Charlotte Mason where we're born persons? I see that as accurate. They are born persons. We are born persons, and therefore we can't control. So what's the opposite of control? I see it as connection. When we give space to our kids to be who they are, even when how they're showing up really isn't how we would show up, or really isn't the way that we would frame things or what we would choose, we give them space to explore things without having someone to fight against. They're feeling supported in their explorations of things. And they know they don't have to have everything figured out, even when their thoughts don't align with us. If we can move towards connection, which means helping them feel seen and heard and understood and supported and not constantly corrected, when we're actively listening to them and we're showing them that we're safe to share themselves with, this being with approach, that will serve to build a connected, trusting relationship that goes way beyond academics. And it's really in this phase of homeschool, high school, or in this teenage phase where we're able to create that kind of connection, because they weren't 6, and well, some of them were, but they weren't 6 saying, "Mommy, I don't want you to do this," or I am going to do it my way. Okay, I know some of them are, but lots of them aren't. Some of them are just following at that stage. But at the teenage, adolescent, individuating stage, they definitely are questioning everything around them. And it turns out the most important parts, in my opinion, of the homeschool, high school experience is about that connection. It's about you listening and seeing and hearing them, But also when you do that, they're learning to do that inside themselves as well. So if you're feeling like you're getting pushback or you're getting resistance, consider how you can connect before you try to correct. Finally, I want to talk about how we can encourage our kids, how Dr. Shefali Sabri encourages us to allow our kids the freedom to be their true selves. Instead of trying to shape them into what we believe society expects, or so that they don't feel a sense of discomfort being different from the people around us and other people's expectations of them, we can help them explore their interests and their dreams and their identities well before they graduate or they leave our home. There was one mom that I worked with that I'm going to call Renata, not her name. And she had 4 kids, and one of her kids was giving her that pushback and that resistance. And she felt like her child wasn't on the path that the other kids were. She was doing things very differently. She described that resistance as rebellion. I tried to help frame it for her because I didn't see myself that it was rebellion, but I tried to help her to see that when she frames it in the words rebellion, then she has to counter that with some pressure or pushback. And then there becomes a control dance or a power dance. But even though her child was different from the other kids, she was different from the other kids. She was just trying to grow up and be independently her, different because she is different from the other kids. And she's going to do this individuating journey differently than her siblings as well. And you can hear more about her conversation with me also on the podcast. So I think homeschooling teens is actually a lot of fun. Being with teens when they're at that stage is so much fun. They're learning about themselves. They're learning about what matters to them. They're learning about what their next steps are. And they're really in a season of trying new things, risking new things. And I think they are craving risk. They're craving trying new things. You know who you are if you're the mom that told me this week or asked me, we're having a conversation about her teenage daughter who was asking if she could go tent on the land or be independent. They have a lot of land, they're homesteading. And she would like to spend more time learning survival skills. And she asked me, would you do that? Would you let your kiddo do that? Well, of course, it depends entirely on the child and it depends on the context. And I can't speak for somebody else's story and how she should parent her child, but I have done that. I have specifically done that story where my child wanted to do independent things like that. And I was a little nervous. And yet I could see that risk really meant something for her. It helped her become more confident in herself. And it seemed like a bigger risk than I would have seen it as. She was able to make a choice for herself. I supported it, even though it looked risky. It serves her adolescent brain in taking those risks and doing interesting things that are outside the box. I think allowing our kids to do whatever they can, the risky things, whatever, some things no, but there's some risky things. It really does help serve them. They're happier for it. And in my experience, these homeschool high school years or these teenage years, kids always surprise you. They have interests that you didn't expect that they would start to participate in. Or there's seasons where they're not really interested and they don't know what to do next. And that's okay too. Just as I was talking with, I just finished a podcast interview with a delightful person named Rachel Martin about igniting our internal sparks. So she's written a book all about purpose and identity. She was a homeschool mom for a while there. I just can't wait to release this episode. It was so much fun chatting with her. But I can see that our desire for purpose and connection and meaning as adults is also our children's journey, especially when they're teens. And there's times where life doesn't feel like it's on fire and exciting every moment. And wow, I get to pursue my interests, Mom. Thank you for homeschooling me. They're also like, also I'm bored, or also I don't like doing what I'm doing anymore, or I don't know what to do next. Those seasons happen with teenagers, and they happen with 51-year-olds too, although I'm pretty good. I'm pretty stoked right now. So I'm in that phase. Nonetheless, we have different phases in our life, and that is perfectly okay wherever we're at. We're all learning as we go. We all have long stories of finding who we really are and what our purpose is. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I could keep going, because I love this story, this conversation about enabling other people to feel purposeful, meaningful in their days, including our teens. Oh, and you, because I love having these conversations with homeschool moms too. So if you're interested in coaching, or if you're interested in learning more about how coaching could support you to do that, you can book a no obligation conversation with me. And I would love to hear your story, because if I've learned anything along, especially the last 6 years of coaching, I've seen we have so many stories to share with each other. Our experiences of kids growing up to be, or growing into that teenage phase, or even as I was sharing earlier about women homeschooling in our 20s and 30s and moving into those perimenopausal years, and how that is dramatically different than the early homeschool years. So I'd love to hear your story. And if you have other ideas you want to share, make sure you do that. I hope you all have a beautiful week. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you can do this. You want to help your kids homeschool through high school? You can do this. If you want to help them move into, I don't know, a mentoring role or a mentorship, or early college days, or into high school, a public high school, whatever it is, you can do this. You can help them move toward deeper purpose. I hope you have a beautiful day, and we'll talk to you soon.